Welcome everyone to Momcast. I am your host, Emma Jade. How's that Halloween hangover treating you? If you're a fan of Mariah Carey, it is time to start thinking about the holidays. NerdWallet says about half of U.S. shoppers from 2022 still have debt they're trying to pay down from last Christmas. And that's kind of the vibe as we head into this holiday shopping season. Inflation is hitting families hard. Spending is going to look different this year. We got more on that in a minute. But today on Momcast, we are introducing you to two moms, both Israelis, on different missions. One, just trying to keep her kids safe and happy in the midst of war, even though they spend hours inside their at-home bomb shelter. The other mother came straight to New York City once the conflict began, working tirelessly to stop the spread of antisemitism, while her children are fighting the war against Hamas. First, before we get to those interviews, let's catch you up on your top stories. Civilians can now leave Gaza for the first time since the start of Israel's war against Hamas. The Rafah border from Gaza into Egypt opened on Wednesday. Hundreds lined up. The process is slow. It's open to those in desperate need first, and we are hearing some Americans and others with foreign passports have made it through. But this is a fluid situation, and updates are pouring in constantly. NBC News and 12news.com, your best bet for the latest on what's happening there. The home where 4 University of Idaho college students were brutally murdered, back open to the FBI this week. Doors, windows, they've been boarded up for months. But the family of those murdered did not want the University of Idaho to tear the home down until after the trial, because it's the biggest piece of evidence the prosecution has. FBI agents went into the home to get more information as the prosecution prepares for suspect Bryan Kohberger's long-awaited trial, gathering documentation in the home to construct visual and audio exhibits and a physical model of the home. As for when this trial will actually get started, it's been almost a year now. There is no set date. Kohberger's defense team says they believe he will be exonerated. Some happy news now. It is November. According to NerdWallet, holiday shopping is going to look different this year. Due to inflation, things are more expensive, so shoppers say they're going to be more careful. I know I'm feeling that too. Most holiday shoppers will put gifts on their credit cards this year, about 74%. More than half of shoppers say they won't buy as many gifts this year because of inflation and how expensive everything is. And a little over a quarter say cutting back is their top priority this holiday season. Once you do buy that gift, you got to get it to the person that you bought it for, right? Since Christmas falls on a Monday this year, kind of make things a little bit trickier when it comes to shipping. So here's the date that you need to remember. 2 of the 3 largest carriers, FedEx and the U.S. Postal Service, recommend mailing domestic packages out starting December 13th. Cutoff dates for Christmas delivery will vary by carrier and method of delivery, but a good rule of thumb for all of us to remember, you got to allow between 5 and 7 business days. As we head over to our interview segment today, we've got a great parenting tip for you from our favorite child and family therapist, Amy Anger, or The Real Parent on Instagram. The battles she does and does not pick with her kids. Check it out.
I'm a child and family therapist and a mom of 6, and I'm going to give you a little peek into the battles that my husband and I pick in our house and the battles that we leave alone. One of the big battles that we pick is phones for kids. We are careful about the age at which we introduce a phone, and then when they get a phone, we're careful about the content and the amount of time that they're able to spend on that phone. Second thing I'm really protective of is sleep. We really set things up so that our kids are set up to get to sleep at a good time, because especially during the tween and teen years, our kids are getting less sleep, and it sets them up to have a lot of mental health struggles. So I know that my kids feel their best when they get enough sleep. So phones, sleep, and the last is kindness and respect in our house. We set up the boundaries and the consequences in our home to support people knowing that kindness and respect are the norm. It doesn't mean you have to always be perfect and you always have to have a smile plastered on your face, but we do expect that there's a certain level of respect. That is because I know that when kids are kind and respectful, they feel better and then they behave better. And when kids behave poorly, they actually feel bad about themselves, which leads them to be less kind or respectful. So we set up those standards in our home. The battles I don't pick: if my child has seconds on dessert, whether or not my child finishes their whole plate, and what my child does and doesn't eat. That's because I realize that food tastes will change over time, and that it's okay if my child doesn't want to eat the green stuff right now. I trust that they'll grow into it, but they're less likely to grow into that if I force it. The other reason is that I know the more closely I'm watching or trying to control what my child eats, the more likely my child is to develop shame around eating and ignore their hunger or satiety cues and make food about control instead of about connection and just feeding their physical self.
We are closing in on the 1 month mark since Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel. And since then, for the average Israeli, life has changed dramatically. I've connected with two mothers, both impacted very differently by this war against Hamas. The first is Lital. She's a mother to two very young children. Here's her new reality.
I have two kids, almost 5-year-old boy, this means that this war is probably his at least third, if not fourth time under rockets. Almost every year since he was born, and we had COVID in the middle as well. So it's been an interesting life. Actually, now he just fell asleep back in his own room bed. He's been sleeping in the bomb shelter that we have, because we just moved into a new house. So we have a bomb shelter in our house, in our basement. In our old apartment, we didn't. So we had to run to the staircase every time with the baby, I think. But FYI, and what we're going to talk about, I think that that was like maybe the first very challenging mom moment that I had. The first time with a baby that I had to run with rockets. That's 4.5-year-old Ronnie. Then I have a 1-year-old Abigail, who actually turned 1 last week. And again, talking about being a mom, do you or do you not celebrate your baby girl's first birthday when there's a war going on around? Does it feel okay? Is it okay? What happens? So another dilemma. And I have a 6-year-old dog, Bailey, which every time a car siren goes off, starts running like crazy around the house because he thinks it's an actual siren. But with that said, both me and my husband are in between jobs. So thankfully, we're both home, which also isn't something to take for granted these days. I have actually background. I've been in the world of like spokesperson and PR for the past 15 years. I started in the Army. I served for 5 years in the IDF spokesperson unit. And yeah, I've seen wars. I've been in wars, but this one is just, it's something else. It's something we've never seen. Like, war was always, like in the war zone. And this time the war is in our homes. And suddenly, and I'm very like cool-headed. I'm very good at managing crisis and situations. And I just find myself sometimes like in the evening sitting in my living room and like looking at the windows, like, are they locked? Did I lock them? What if someone comes, like, just like all these questions that I never thought I would. Yeah, I don't know. You have 4 kids, right? I mean, do you ever find yourself sitting in a room and looking and saying, okay, which cupboard is the best for them to hide if someone comes in now?
I cannot even imagine.
And I'm not near the Gaza border, right? I mean, we've had sirens where I live almost daily. Yeah. But like these thoughts, it's just something different this time.
Because your son, unfortunately, is old enough to kind of pick up a little bit about what's going on. What has that been like? What have those conversations been like?
He's not much of a talker. He's very aware. I can see it. He's on YouTube a lot. We always make fun and about, we always have the mom guilt, right? Yeah. You give your kids too much sugar. They're on their iPads too much. And obviously at wartime, you're closed at home. You're afraid to go out. because you don't know if a siren will catch you or not. So he's a lot on YouTube, and I see that, sometimes he knows that I don't allow anything with shooting or anything like that. And even if he watches like silly, stupid videos, and then like there'll be like a siren or something similar to siren, I found that he immediately like turned to me and like, don't worry, mom, it's not a siren, it's just the video. I'll change, okay? Don't worry. And as I said, I'm very relatively cool. I'm trying like not to panic. I try not always successfully, but I try not to cry in front of him. The nights are harder. But yeah, like last week I decided that after a few days at home, my parents live in the same city, I decided to go to them. And while I was there were two sirens. One caught us when we were in their house. Fine, no problem. We went to the bomb shelter. The other one caught us when we were walking outside. And we found ourselves like running to the bomb shelter, and we go in, it's a public one, so there were more people there, and adults with no kids starting to talk. Oh, did you hear this, that? I was like, guys, they're children. And I started doing like math problems with him to try to like distract him. But then when I drove back home with him, you time when you drive home, because you're like, okay, they're like round hours, so let's wait to like 5 past just to make sure that like they didn't try to catch the news cycle, and maybe there's a better chance that I can drive home without a siren going off. But then I started driving and I was like, wait, I'm with 2 kids in the car. If a siren does go off, you're talking about the fact that he understands. I need to make sure that he understands, and that he's, like some sort of expectation talk. And I said, hey, Ronnie, you know that like when there's a siren at home, we do this and this and this. And he loves math. So everything that's like, there are 5 steps, he'll remember the number 5 or whatever. So I said, well, there might also be a situation where there's a siren in the car. So I want you to know what we're going to do. And you know how you're big enough and you can open your own seatbelt. So I'll stop the car, and while you open your seatbelt, I'll go to Abigail, the baby, because she's little, she doesn't know to open. I'll help her open, but then I'll come to you and open the door. Don't worry, I will come to open the door for you, because like I just didn't want to be a situation where he thinks that I'm not coming for him.
Right.
And the whole way home we practice like the steps and then what we have to do. And he's like a very clean boy, and I had to explain why I'll open the door, and then we're gonna run away from the car, and we need to lay on the ground. And he's like, "What? I don't want to lay on the ground." And you're like, okay, how am I gonna explain it? Because we didn't really discuss rockets yet. Yeah. And I mean, he kind of knows and he kind of doesn't. And a few times I've tried to like open a discussion, not trying to put words in his mouth, but like, do you want to talk? Is there anything that's worrying you or not? Or in most cases he didn't want to talk, so I didn't push it. But the fact that it was his choice to sleep for 2 weeks in the bomb shelter, I think says enough. And you know what? And despite everything I'm telling you right now, I'm the lucky one, right? The stories, it's hard to start, and it's like motherhood is a cycle. When do you start being a mom? The second you realize you're pregnant? Is it harder being a mom to babies that don't understand and, time will pass and they won't remember? Is it easier for 4 or 5-year-olds where you can kind of maybe still make it a game, or teenage kids that you don't have to carry, right, in your arms to shelter, but they really understand what's going on? Or is it harder maybe if your child is in the army? I try, as I mentioned, I'm with the kids most days, and during the day I try as much as possible. I'm a news freak, and obviously the situation is extreme, but I try when I'm with the kids to watch as little as I can, just so I can cope through the day. I do break down every night, but then the one time they said that they did give the Telegraph a photo, and there was front page in the Telegraph. I don't know if you saw it, and they didn't say what photo. They just said it's hard. And I said, you know what? I found a place where I could see the photos a little censored, and I went to see it. It was a photo of a dead baby. And I didn't see everything because it was censored, but I just saw enough to know that my daughter has the same. And I just went and I took it out of her closet. Mm. And I'm like, people need to realize that being a parent in this situation is impossible. We have mom guilt. Now it's times 100.
What do you think you'll tell your son and your daughter in a couple of years when they are old enough to understand? What will you tell them about this time?
Well, we're not over it yet. So I don't know. I don't know where it's going to meet me on an even more personal level. Knock on wood that it won't. But I don't know. And I thought that COVID is the craziest thing that we're going to tell them about their childhood. I'm going to tell them that they were brave and that they were amazing and that they kept us hopeful. But other than that, it's a good question.
And you know, we think this is happening a world away, but if you look, you can find a connection. Latal, for example, I found through my father's childhood best friend's daughter's friend of a friend. And now we chat weekly. She gives me updates. She sends me pictures about what life is like for her and her adorable, sweet family. But it just goes to show how small this world really is. And if you look, you can offer support and love to those who are in the middle of a crisis a world away, because you probably know someone who knows someone who knows someone. I've got another incredible mother to introduce you to. Her name is Michal. She's a mother of 4. And when the war was launched, she left her home and her family in Israel to fight. She flew to New York City, where she is working day and night to stop the spread of anti-Semitism. The Anti-Defamation League said data shows a nearly 400% increase in reported incidents of anti-Semitic harassment, vandalism, and assaults since Hamas terrorists stormed Israel on October 7th. Michal is part of Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. She just got that assignment a couple weeks ago, and then this happened. Here's my interview with her.
As Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, by the way, quite a recent appointment about 3 weeks ago, I bring with me that set of expertise and understanding. But in many ways, I think what we've seen since October 7th is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call, but in many ways, wake-up calls sometimes are ignored. You know, that's just the way of the world. And the reason that I came to North America, although 3 of my own kids are in the army currently, the reason that I came to North America is to try and make accessible the urgency with which we have to regard this assault on civilization. It's not an attack only on the Jewish nation state, on Israel. It's not only the anti-Semitic inspired genocidal hate, barbarically murdering and pillaging and raping and burning and tearing babies out of their mother's arms and burning entire families in their safe spaces, even as they continue to launch rockets at Israel's civilians from densely populated civilian areas in Gaza. So that's what I do. It's what brings me to this role. It's a role that comes at a time of growing, as I said, urgency. And there's a coalition of special envoys around the world, which makes my heart break, because if the United States and Australia and Canada and the European Union and 30 plus countries around the world recognize that there is a need for a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, it's because of the increase in anti-Semitism.
You said that you have three kids that are part of the army right now. Is that over in Israel?
Yeah.
What are they doing? What are you hearing?
So I want to explain something about Israeli reality.
Yeah.
Everybody has been deployed to this war in Israel. Every individual has mandated service, military service or national service. That means that all of our kids and ourselves have served in the army and continue serving in reserves until we're too old and the army has no more use for us. And that means that every single family, in every single neighborhood, in every single city, in every single place that you can imagine, has been affected by the war that is raging. Children, husbands, wives, grandparents, all of them, all of us. And whoever is not on the front lines deployed to fight with a gun and with boots and with tanks is actually in the home front command, because everything is in war mode. It's very hard to make accessible. It was why it was important to me to get on a plane and come here. And I've been here for 4 days and I can't remember the feeling anymore. I can remember it intellectually. There is a war, but the feeling of war is a feeling. It is something that it's not cerebral. It's not something that's easily conveyed because this doesn't make sense. It's not a rational something. So when I walk around New York and the world is as usual, I know that there is a war raging in my home, and I have to make that accessible because I really believe that unless we understand the urgency of this war and sound the alarm bells and wake all of us that really naturally want to know that everything is okay. But the truth is that everything is not okay. The truth is that protests all over the world, in Melbourne, Australia, in New York City, in Germany, that justify, legitimate, excuse, or deny the barbaric savagery that we saw on October 7th are a manifestation of the same anti-Semitism that enabled them.
You're heading back to Israel tomorrow, right? What does life look like for when you get back?
So I have to share that just this morning, I delayed my flight to next week because my kids said to me, Mom, we are fighting a war in every way we know how. You know how to fight the war of words, and you know how to fight the war for public opinion. So we know that the hardest thing for you is to be far away in case any of us need you, but you have to fight the war the way you know how. And so I'm continuing from New York to Washington, and I'll remain until next week. And the goal really is to make accessible these messages to as many audiences as possible, to answer all of the questions that I know are out there about how this affects everybody's life and not just Israel or Jews around the world, and to bring the sense of urgency that I feel that I think we have to awaken as many people to, in terms of leaning in and calling on our governments and calling out news agencies that rush to report something that has actually been reported by Hamas, the same genocidal terror organization. Really everybody leaning in and being boots on the ground in this unconventional war for public opinion and for facts.
My thanks to these two incredible mothers, incredible women who in the midst of war are fighting in their own ways to protect their families, their communities, and their religion. Thanks for watching Momcast. Remember, the show does not end here. Join me on Instagram at EmmaJadeTV or just search Momcast. I'll see you next week on Momcast.